Hi, my name is John Jones, and I did a continuity of operations plan for the University Fire Department. I worked at the fire department or at the university for about 3 years, and I chose to do that department versus the department that I work at now because I just had a little bit more time there, and have had the opportunity to kind of see how that operation is run and what we do in the event of emergencies and how we handle those situations. So I felt it would be better to do this project on something that I have a little bit more information on and I know the exact resources to contact for the problems that I'm trying to solve. I started out by making a record of distribution for departments that would be working with this plan. The thing is a lot of the departments rely on mutual aid agreements, and when there is problems, we all have to kind of work with one another because of how small the borough is and how many different areas are covered by different entities. So I thought it'd be important to make sure that you have on record who actually has the plan and what when they were distributed it. Following that, I put a record of changes so that when this is reviewed annually, there is the opportunity to go in, make the changes, note the changes so that, say, in the future, we come back to a decision that we've already gone through. We can look at it in the past and see maybe there's a reason why we changed it from that to a different situation. Then I move on to my table of contents. My table of contents just breaks down just like any normal table of contents and shows that we have a bunch of different things in here. It breaks it down so you can easily find the corresponding item with the page, and then at the very end where all the annexes are. So I started out the actual COOP with the organizational chart, and I thought that that'd be very important because not everyone's going to know the level or the organization's standings with each staff member. So just starting from top, there's the fire chief, comes down, and then there's admins who don't necessarily hold rank, but aren't with the on the line workers, which is the office manager and the admin generalist, as well as a union representative for the union steward, or a medical director who works hand in hand but doesn't really carry weight with the employees, and also the commissioner who is in charge of funding that the department chooses to put towards certain things. Then we're broken down into our fire marshal, who's also an assistant chief, Ron Templeton, and then also the prevention technician who works right under him. And we're actually missing a emergency management coordinator, but if that gets filled, most likely not anytime soon because of the recent budget cuts, that would be in that location above the platoons. Following that, we have 3 battalion chiefs for A, B, and C platoon, and they each supervise 2 fire captains and then 14 firefighters. So then I moved on to our executive summary, which just kind of shows, how the entire lineup of the COOP. And I got a lot of this information from staff members there, and I also received a lot of it while I was working there. You end up picking up things, and it just becomes part of the job, learning about the department and getting to know how to solve problems and what are problems that need to be solved. So I didn't want to go too in depth on the executive summary, just to kind of give a brief overview. And then I brought on the introduction, and I just knew what the service area covered, so I knew that there was a risk covering the airport. That could potentially happen at the airport, as well as working with the airport police and fire in order to have a fluent operation. For the purpose, I stuck with 4 major things because there's an infinite number of problems that can occur in any different department, but I wanted to think of the 4 that were most likely to occur. So I decided relocation would be very important in case there's ever a loss of a facility, loss of vital equipment, which can happen very easily. Say, if one of our apparatus goes out of service, gets into an accident, we may no longer have the equipment that we may be required to operate on an ambulance. Sudden reduction in staffing, which could occur from some kind of disaster in the area, not allowing people to get to work, putting people may be injured and unable to work, and then also loss of mutual aid resources in a large disaster event. As I said before, mutual aid is incredibly important to every department in the area, and it's so much so that on a regular basis, departments are sending ambulances into other service areas and engines in order to help with fire or EMS. Following that, I have applicability and scope, and that pretty much just addresses the roles of the department and the staff there, as well as what it ends up encompassing overall for the staffing. Then I went into essential functions, and the thing about essential functions is, once again, there are a bunch of different things that the department has to accomplish. However, we had to try to limit it, and in the event of a crisis, what are the most important? And the three that came out were responding to emergency calls with immediate life threat, assisting nearby departments on major incidents, and responding to non-immediate life-threatening emergency calls. So I put those on there, and the third one may stick out to you as, why would you need to respond to something that's not immediate life-threatening? Because we are a fire department and we still do serve the service area, and because we cannot necessarily make the judgment on whether it's immediately life-threatening without some of the equipment in the hospital, it's important that we still treat all of our patients equally. And we also need to make sure that we can assist nearby departments, because the fact of the matter is that they're probably going to be in crisis as well, and we would expect them to do the same for us in the event of the emergency. After that, I went into the concept of operations, and that just kind of covers what is expected from the employees of knowing about the plan. And I went with because of how detrimental it can be if this kind of crisis were to occur, it is incredibly important that every employee has a good understanding and has been fully trained to achieve this goal. So it needs to be able to be implemented within 10 hours following a crisis, and if people aren't ready for it, then it's going to set everything back and people aren't going to be on the same page, which could be detrimental to the cause. So essentially every employee needs to know this COOP up and down, because it gives an idea of how the events should be taken care of, the plan that will be followed through, and who is in charge, and the chain of command that will be designed following. Okay, so for phase 1, activation and relocation, the idea is to make sure that all the equipment is ready to go in service, and then once it's ready to go, it needs to be moved to a different location. So the locations can kind of vary. There's a couple options. If one station were to go down, then all the equipment can be run out of the secondary station, and vice versa. Now, say both stations are down, there needs to be an alternative that we can relocate and put our equipment. The fire department apparatus and the ambulances require a lot of maintenance, so it's not something that you can just park outside. A lot of the times they need to be plugged in or plugged into pressurized air to keep their air brakes in service, and also to keep their batteries charged. But with how much those batteries take to charge, it is a huge deal if it can't be plugged in for even a few hours. There's a list of the apparatus that need to be transported to the facility first, and if they are not all able to be transferred, then it goes by the list, priority being at the top and least priority being at the bottom. After that is the decision process, and that essentially puts the highest ranking officer in charge. We operate very, very much so with a chain of command, and in the most ideal situation, the fire chief would obviously be the highest ranking officer, but because he's only one individual and he can't be everywhere, there is always the chance that he may not be able to respond to the situation, for instance, if he is out of town. And also, because we need this response to be immediate, it will initially be the on-duty battalion chief who will be activating and then becoming the chief officer with the highest rank. But with how the department runs, it isn't impossible for a captain to be acting as the battalion for the day. And if that is the case, the captains also need to be just as trained as well as the firefighters in the event that they may have to one day activate this or make the decision to activate. Then once it's activated, it's very important that the rest of the higher ups are informed. So the chief and the assistant chief need to be notified. And so if they're notified, then there's a potential that they can come in and take over, which would be very smooth for the operation and be preferred. But that is only if time permits, because in the event of an emergency, the last thing we need to do is have someone worrying about trying to be on the phone when they need to be making decisions. And then the successors are lined out just so that there isn't any confusion between who is going to remain in charge if they are available or on scene. And that starts with obviously the fire chief, and then going down to the assistant chief, and then to the on-duty battalion chief. So the delegation of authority is very important because it just shows that even if the fire chief is in charge, all the emergency response strategies and tactics will be left to the on-duty battalion chief, as so stated in the delegations of authority. Next, I talk about the alternate facility operations as our phase 2. And as I said before, the site that has to be used must be able to equip the fire department apparatus. And so there was a lot of time trying to figure out what was going to be the best location. And, they would have to be able to stay in operation, being able to work around the clock at this location. But first, we decided what would need to be kept at that location and what would need to be carried over and what would need to be backed up at a different location. And so we started out and figured out that the COOP plan would need to be at the alternate facility from the get-go. Then after that, the SOPs, the employee information, the building pre-fires, and a secondary COOP would need to be hand-carried to the facility. What I decided was the backed up at the third location, we would need some operational SOPs, vehicle service documents, COOP plans, and phone/email rosters. So then comes the reconstruction. And the reconstruction is important because you don't want to get too ahead of yourself, and you want to make sure that everything is back in order and you are able to fully staff the apparatus and put it in full operation, and also that you have the capabilities of working out of the station that you're going back to. You also want to make sure that the building, for instance, if there was an earthquake or some kind of other emergency that could potentially damage the building, that it was declared safe and to be in use before you were operating back out of it again. And for the planning responsibilities, just kind of gives a brief overview of how it's updated, and that would be the update plan would be on the part of the assistant chief. Updating telephone rosters would be on the administrator. Conducting alert and notification tests would be on the assistant chief also, and developing and leading COOP training would be on the assigned battalion chief, because the assigned battalion chief is always working directly with the on-line workers. So for the alternate location, we talked about the 2 stations, but we decided the best place would be, and when I say we, I mean the employees that I discussed with. I actually, like I said before, I received a lot of information from employees that are working there, but I honestly just sat down with a few of the guys that I used to work with and asked them what they thought would be the best way of doing this. And I put that with what I already learned from a lot of the chief level staffing, and kind of combine that to make what I thought would be the best idea. But we figured Steve's Fire Department, Station 61, would be the best location for an alternate site. It's approximately 5 miles away, and because of that, it's still within a quick response time. I know that the university has helped pay for the station itself when it was first created, because with the idea of allowing it to be used as a source of water, because they have a full tank there that we can use to pull out in areas that don't have hydrants. But also they are fully equipped with large bay areas that are not always full, that we could fit our apparatus in and keep plugged in and on air. Next, I briefly talk about communications and how we would all be operating on ALMR radios and a TAC channel in the event of a crisis, and if that were to go, we would use line of sight. After that, I talk about testing and training exercises, and it would be required that the battalion chief would run one random test just to make sure that his employees are ready to go. And finally, the plan needs to be updated twice annually just to make sure that there are no major changes. On the last page, I have the location of the fire department and directions of getting there, as well as just an explanation of some of the acronyms used. Thank you.